Gravity Falls. In 2012, showrunner Alex Hirsch launched his series about two twins who stay with their great uncle Stan, or Grunkle Stan, in the small secluded town of Gravity Falls, Oregon, and from there experience strange phenomenon, including but not limited to horny gnomes, UFOs, shape-shifting beasts, odd townspeople, junkyard hobos, rich people. Yeah, you get the point. In any case, I began watching this show around the time I watched Star vs. the Forces of Evil. See my video for more on that. Now, initially, I was watching Star more as it was pretty hilarious and super entertaining in the first few seasons. But as the inevitable crash of Season 4 came, and I finished it not very fulfilled, I sat back in front of the television and decided to get this cartoon mystery sci-fi a bit more of an in-depth watch. Now, I went into Gravity Falls like a lot of shows, with pretty much next to no knowledge about the characters, the world, or the many intricate subplots running in the background. But as it stands now, half a year later, I have watched it to completion and can honestly say this not only lives up to its good reputation, it is without a doubt one of the best cartoons of the 2010s and can run on par with many of the shows that defined my own childhood way back in the 90s and early 2000s. I see that same level of care and attention to detail in the story, as well as the nuances of smart adult humor and wittiness as other works of passion that have been released in the last 20 years. And on top of that, this show graces itself in the modern era beautifully, with concepts that have grown more relatable and true with each passing year of our ever-advancing state of technology in the world. So, without further ado, let's pull back the curtain and take an in-depth look at what makes this series great, start to finish.
Uncle Stan, are you wearing a blindfold?
Nah, but with these cataracts, I might as well be.
Season 1 of Gravity Falls to me was like taking a snowball and sending it down a hill. What started as a small, insignificant story began to get bigger and bigger and bigger, until it fully immersed everything around it and eventually became the show that we know for today. We open on twins Mabel and Dipper finding themselves in Gravity Falls, Oregon. Now, as a kid who grew up in a small town in the northern United States, I really appreciated all the quirky little jokes regarding the townsfolk. And although my hometown was a bit bigger, Gravity Falls still emitted the same isolated, close-knit community feel that permeated my own childhood. All the funny people with their weird quirks, the fact that everyone knows everybody else, and that if you venture out 15 minutes in most directions, you'll find yourself in the middle of the woods. So even by the first episode, I really liked the feel of the show. It felt kinda cozy, familiar, and down home, but with a wackiness and a mysterious angle that felt pretty refreshing. Dipper kinda reminds me of myself when I was a kid. Kind of a studious person who acts a bit more mature than others their age, likes a girl who doesn't like him back. Yeah, got plenty of those stories, but moving on. Likes to keep journals and feels somewhat out of place among other kids. And also, like Dipper, I have a sister who can be a complete goofball at times, although Mabel far surpasses my own in this respect. It's fun to see these two romp around town getting in all sorts of trouble. And then there's Grunkle Stan. I know at least 20 guys like this, a bit rough around the edges, old school, always pining for the ladies, no pun intended, and keen to save a buck and make a buck on anything they can. Overall, a lot of the adult jokes come from Stan, and his character just made me laugh the most. And I don't know if that's because as an adult I get the humor more, or just that I think crotchety old men trying to cheat through life is amusing in a kid's cartoon, but either way, it's pretty damn funny. Seuss is that relatable, simple friend, and he's usually got a few laughs associated, even if he does remind me of...
Oh boy, 3 a.m.
Yeah. Oh, now that I mention it, I guess Stan's a bit like...
Hello, I like money.
What inspired you to build a second Krusty Krab right next door to the original?
Money.
Well, what can I say? Learn from the masters, right? Wendy is pretty awesome too. She's got an emotionally intelligent side, but isn't afraid to kick butt when it comes down to it. Overall, she's a great addition to the cast. And these five make a great contribution of funny interactions and entertaining shenanigans to the overall show. Let's see, who else? Old Man McGucket is pretty funny, which ends up turning into something much more, but I'll get into that later. And Robbie is kind of like Sebastian from Stardew Valley if he liked to pick on little kids in his never-ending non-productive free time, and is also a perpetual dick to everybody. I also thought seeing his parents might make me sympathize with him a bit, and yeah, I can confirm his parents seem fine on the outside, but there is some weird stuff with people who never stop smiling. No wonder Robbie is pretty depressed. He's still kind of a prick though. Gideon, or Kentucky Fried Gideon as I like to call him sometimes, is a decent addition and pretty hilarious rival to Stan. Mabel's weird friends are fun and, well, weird as you might expect. I like the pet pig, and Pacifica Northwest began as a royal pain in the keister to Mabel, and just a horribly entitled popular girl, but as the plot went on, she gradually sees eye to eye with the twins more, and paired with one of my favorite episodes, Northwest Mansion Mystery, becomes a character I actually really liked later on. I especially enjoyed how she and Dipper got along as friends eventually. It really helped to show a dynamic side to a character that is too often just relegated to a simple popular girl trope and never gets any real development or change. She did kind of backslide a bit in the finale in her personality, but more in a tsundere kind of way than anything super serious. So, whatever, I guess. And moving on to the plot, I really liked it. I will admit, it was a decently slow start for me. It took a bit for the show to sink in, and in the first 5 or 6 episodes, I was struggling a bit. Whereas other shows I've seen start off with a very flashy and quirky plot that kind of throw everything they have at the pilot, Gravity Falls really didn't feel that way. With shows like SpongeBob or Star or others, from the get-go there's this kind of wild energy to the jokes, and on top of that the main characters are really goofy and the scenarios are absolutely ridiculous with super exaggerated facial expressions and all these little anecdotes smushed into a few minutes of dialogue and interactive story. But with Gravity Falls, you get a quiet town with a huckster of an uncle and a main character who is very mature with a quiet nature and a serious look on his face most of the time. This ain't your typical Disney princess story. There's no tower, no school, and whatever majestic creatures are around are more interested in forcing Dipper's sister into marriage than killing people or singing a song and all that stuff they typically do in Disney musicals. So right off the bat, Gravity Falls has a more down-to-earth tone. And I noticed it also had less jokes, with a large amount of them aimed at a mature audience. Overall, the show was a bit slower, and this is not to say it was bad, it was just different. For Disney, the land of musicals, it was kind of unconventional to have a series like this, and for many, including myself, that's one of the reasons I was initially drawn to it. But I'd be lying if I said I found it super riveting from the start. No, the reality was that I was a bit lukewarm to the plot through the first few episodes. It wasn't until around episode 5 or 6, when the quote-unquote Dipper tries to impress Wendy subplot was introduced, that I began to see a cohesive continuation of the plot episodes and began to get a little interested. And by episode 7, the copy machine episode, I had gotten comfortably into the show, and at this point was well acquainted with the characters and their respective stories. I was really starting to like it. And of course, I was expecting a typical 12 to 13 episode season with a cliffhanger at the end, but to my surprise, Gravity Falls' first season stretched to 20 whole episodes, which I find is kind of rare to see in this day and age. And little did I know how much things were going to ramp up. There was no muddy shipping or overdone tropes in the first season, just kind of a nice, steady progression in preparation for the surprise, or the many surprises that were to come in the second season. From about episode 9 or 10 though, I was fully invested. I'd really warmed up to the characters and the plot and was eager for more, and coupled with a solid cliffhanger and season ending, Gravity Falls was quickly shaping up to be a really good show. I was glad I stuck around too because it was about to get even better. Overall, great stuff here. The season was a banger. 8 out of 10 if you haven't already, then definitely go watch it. Season 2 of Gravity Falls is one of those rare happenings for me where the sequel far surpasses the predecessor in terms of interest, entertainment, and overall plot narrative. I really loved this season. As good as the first season was, this season felt like the writers were just waiting to pounce with all the super convoluted, super interesting plot twists and sci-fi stuff, which I have to say were executed really well. This show has the mark of planning. In other words, everything seems like it was thought out and carefully considered before the studio got to work. And as a result, it's one of the best cartoon series I've seen in the last decade. So what makes this season so great? Well, folks, this is where all the payoff from season 1 hits. And what I mean by that is this is where we learn about the 3 journals, the portal to another world, and about McGucket's past helping to create it. His story is a sad one, seeing a scientific scholar being reduced to a crazy homeless man, but it helps to know he regains his personality and his intelligence once he finds his memories and records partway through the season. And this season also features my favorite episode, Seuss and the Real Girl, where a yandere anime girl from a visual novel becomes obsessed with Seuss, and with the help of his friends he must defeat her. Oh, and he also meets a girl from the real world too? I just love this episode because I'm an anime nerd and just got a huge kick out of seeing the visual novel scene being explored in this show from Disney of all things. But what can I say? It was pretty cool. Moving on, all I can really say is the fact that things really tightened up this season. We saw the main plot come to its head with a twist, finding out about Stan's past and his lost brother Ford. What I think is cool about this is that this never feels shoehorned in as a plotline, rather it's been more or less hinted at from the beginning. And with Dipper and Mabel finding out about this stuff all at the same time, as we the audience do, keeps the immersion hyped up. This and the fact that Bill Cipher has been the only real enemy so far that has posed a major threat to the world, and of course, as you might expect, the showrunners were just getting started with him in Season 1. What Season 2 brings is on a whole nother level. But I'll get back to Bill, he can wait for a minute. Anyway, this show did a great job of fleshing out the characters in the main story, while also adding in little side plots here and there where it was appropriate. Now, I won't go much into it, but this was pretty much what I outlined was wrong with Star vs. the Forces of Evil in my other video. Basically, it couldn't figure out what its identity was, and therefore kept tripping over itself in the later seasons, as well as introducing filler right after main plot cliffhangers or times where it would have made no sense in the story structure or for the characters themselves to do so. But Gravity Falls seems to have this taken care of. Sure, there's silliness, and as usual, cartoon characters here are indestructible, but hey, that's to be expected with any piece of entertainment, and it's just the right balance of absurd for this viewer. All that aside, Stan's backstory answered most of the questions the show had been teasing since its debut. How did the Mystery Shack start? Who was the author of the journals? Who was Bill, and what the hell was that massive contraption down in the basement? And what was the deal with all the weird stuff going on in Gravity Falls anyway? I loved how the show, after all the build-up, didn't just drop the ball and say, "Tune in next time," or, "Well, tell us what you think online and good luck getting the real answer to what actually happened," like so many half-baked productions do. Nope, this one stuck it out and proved in Season 2 that it was brilliant from the beginning. All the important plot-related questions were answered, and satisfied, I was able to move on to the finale, Weirdmaggedon, with no reservations. Okay, Weirdmaggedon. All I have to say is thank God this didn't suck. I've seen so many shows get everything down in the lead only to barf it up in the last few moments. But Hirsch and the folks over at Disney really nailed this one down, and that's a huge relief. So let's see, the finale. Well, it's broken up into several parts, 3 to be exact, each very good in its own right. At this point, the show morphed into pure entertainment, and while I set aside the entire section to talk about it, I'm finding there isn't a ton to say about it. This is mostly due to the fact that this finale is just a lot of fun. I will say the idea of Bill Cipher possessing Earth just to party and do random stuff seemed like kind of throwing a line into the water with no bait, but it wasn't a huge thing. It would have been cooler if Bill had some actual world domination plans and decided he wanted to connect the universes, or manipulate the Earth's landscape, or something other than the "I'm a playboy, so I'm just gonna screw around like I'm rich" thing, but again, it's not a huge deal. I just felt there could have been more as the potential allowed for it. In any case, I enjoyed Dipper kicking butt with Wendy as they made their way to try and save Mabel from her delusional bubble. But here's where things get a little inconsistent. See, Bill enlisted Gideon, the enemy of the entire series up until now, to be his assistant in catching Dipper and everyone who tries to defy the Triangle Man from having fun. And eventually, Dipper and Wendy find themselves in a situation where they have to convince Gideon to come to their side. What ensues is probably the only time during the entire show's run I actually found myself remarking about something being hilariously cliché. Because in the next 2 minutes, the guy who's been the antagonist for most of the series has a whirlwind redemption arc, and then boom, he's on their side for the rest of the show. I know that people bring this up a lot in redemption arcs, but if you want something like that done right, you can look no further than Avatar: The Last Airbender and Zuko's redemption, who slowly waffled between honor, family, and personal happiness before he finally found a path that served him well in the 3rd season. But in Gideon's case, it felt squeezed in as more of a requirement than a nuanced, mature plot growth. It only took a moment or two to happen, when he never in the entirety of the show until this one time showed signs of ever becoming good. And to add to that inconsistency is the fact that the only reason he turned good in the end was because he loves Mabel? Wait, okay, let me just rewind this for a second. Huh. Oh yeah, there it was. Okay, so there was a passing mention that he had a weird crush on her or something and wanted to make her his bride way back in season 1. And then never really mentioned it again until now? Boy, for a show that likes to tie up loose ends, I have to admit that this was a bit of a stretch, and a pretty glaring example of the narrative tripping over itself and forcing a shoehorned redemption in a pretty sorta half-assed way. It felt kinda cheap. No, it didn't ruin anything huge, but I still had to dock a bit from the overall score for it because there were better ways to handle that exchange instead of a force-fed motivational speech. Anyway, we catch up with Dipper, Seuss, and Wendy as they go into the weird Mabel bubble. But Dipper struggles to get Mabel out of this weird, deceiving hellscape, and overall, I enjoyed this part. It was cool to see Dipper trying to stay strong as even his friends were swept away by their fantasies. And yeah, you could say it seems inconsistent for Mabel's character to ignore her brother and deny coming back to the real world until the end, but if Mabel was brainwashed and felt her world coming apart when Dipper decided to stay in Gravity Falls, I can kind of see how this would warp her perception, and it would take some convincing to bring her back to reality. The courtroom sequence was pretty funny, and I liked how a lot of the townsfolk were hiding at the Mystery Shack with the added protection. It's a nice little tie-in from the Unicorn Hair episode. Anyway, moving on, we get this Chicken Run-like building montage, and at this point the show is pretty entertaining again, and I decided to just have fun with the whole Machine versus Bill stuff and not worry too much about all the nitty-gritty details. But after a surprisingly easy duel with Bill, these two dudes couldn't even get together long enough to hold hands for more than a second. Okay, I get that they have beef, but in all honesty, most of the show I sided with Stan is even what drove them apart wasn't entirely his fault. Besides, Ford never actually thanked him for bringing him back to Earth or apologized for treating his brother like crap all those years. But why was now the time for these two idiots to fight about it? Bill comes back, turns the situation to snafu again, and the two brothers finally have to overcome their differences. And what results I found was a pretty clever use of their similar appearance to trick Bill into Stan's head. This was relatively believable and a pretty neat way to get them to work together, and with that, I move on to the conclusion of the show. The end of Gravity Falls felt like the end of a long and energetic journey. There were friends made, adventures shared, mysteries uncovered, and hope for the future. And it was really nice to have a conclusion that felt like it was given the heaviness and the finality that it needed to keep a viewer invested right up until the closing credits. There wasn't some epiphany or, look what just happened cliffhanger, or just a regular episode that ignored the weight that comes with a show's conclusion. Instead, Dipper and Mabel, along with her pet pig, did in fact leave Gravity Falls at the end of summer, and what followed was a mellow and emotionally poignant end for a show I had grown very fond of. So it concluded with Seuss taking over the Mystery Shack.
Is this the Krusty Krab?
No, this is Patrick.
Pacifica being moved to see the plight of the masses. McGucket getting rich. the two Pines brothers sailing across the world for treasure, and a calming satisfaction at the show's end. I love Gravity Falls, and I was a bit sad to see it end, but happy that I experienced it. And best of all, I can move on to the next series knowing that the door has happily closed on this one. Since then, a bunch of spin-off products have appeared for Gravity Falls, with Alex Hirsch saying he is finished with the series, but possibly not the universe. So we'll see what's cooking up on his next adventure. But anyway, my thoughts and my score. The finale gets a 7 to 7.5 out of 10. It was thoroughly enjoyable, and though not everything was perfect, the ending was one of my favorites in modern television. So overall, Gravity Falls gets an 8.5 to 9 out of 10. It's a show that I would absolutely recommend people watch for an entertaining journey of mystery, jokes, and adventure. Anyway, that's going to be it for today, folks. Let me know what you think of Gravity Falls in the comments. Like, subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.